always, we're going to give just a little bit of time for people to show up, and hopefully this is working. So let's have a look. Uh-huh. Just waiting for people to show up to see if this is doing what it should be. And I can start once I get some comments or someone waves hi and so on. Because you know what the internet is like where I am, and this is a fairly important video, so. Okay, I see we're live. Let me see if, all right. Whoever's online, send me a quick hi so I know it works. Okay, it works. It works. Excellent. All right, great. So we can get started. So today's topic is something that I've had reason to think about a couple of times, well, more than a couple of times, really. But it's one that I have learned at great cost. Having said that, Ariel agrees. It is one that I have learned at great cost over the years. Just give me a quick second. She doesn't like this topic. Nah, Ariel doesn't like this topic. Yes. Well, the little fellows know what they like and what they don't like. And some topics are a bit too close to their own processes and journeys. So, today we are going to be talking about the wounded healer versus the wounding healer. And kudos to my brother, because I originally had a different title to this. I was going to call it the damaged healer. He said, no, it's wounding. And as usual, he is very right. So, kudos to him and much gratitude for feedback on this piece, which I know is going to trigger quite a few people. But sometimes the most important stuff does. And more often than not, that tends to be the work that I do. So, most, if not all of us, have some understanding of what a wounded healer is. And it basically means all healers. Because if you tell me you found a healer or facilitator who has never experienced a wound, or someone who has never gone through pain or suffering, either you have gone directly to God, beyond all negativity, or you have basically conned yourself. Because every one of us, on any part of our facilitative journey, are always in some situation of learning, healing, getting beaten up, recovering from it, looking at shit we didn't know we had, purifying that, and then getting back on the horse. Every single one of us does this. This is, healing and wounding are intimately connected. Now, I don't think that you need to get beaten up almost as hard as I do all of the time to heal. But, some parts of it is also part and parcel of your journey. For me, for example, I have Chiron opposed my Saturn. So this is part and parcel of my journey to work through and figure out. I ain't complaining, I'm just saying it as it is. And people who have similar experiences to me will tend to have very strong Chiron placements. But that is okay. And I want to be very clear. This work is not intended to shame, blame, or in any way demonize those who have gone through trauma and pain, because none of us are exempt from it. Everyone is going to, at some point in their lives, whether they've done facilitation for years, whether they've just started, they're going to hit that point where they go, oh my God, I know absolutely nothing. And that happened to me. Whatever I tell you is not some theory. I live it. That's why I talk to you, because I know what I'm talking about, because I live it. It's how it goes. I mean, I encountered, after looking for so many years, going through so many people, getting myself even more beat up by people who didn't know what they were doing. When I finally met the right facilitator for me, who I call my teacher, he doesn't like that name, but that's why he's my teacher. I remember the first session with him. And even though I was someone who was very diligent, always focused on trying to improve myself, always trying to figure stuff out, I realized in that first session that I knew absolutely jack shit. And I felt like crap for a week afterwards. For a week, I felt punched in the gut. And had I just walked away from that thinking this was a bad facilitation or I'm not worth anything, that would have been the end of that particular story. I looked at it. I looked at, why am I feeling bad? What did I learn? What do I need to do to get back on the horse? And that's what I did. And this was years ago, years ago. But that's the power of what a good facilitation can feel like, especially if there are things that you need to be shaken out of. Which is why when people come to me, either the person is already on the same vibe as me and everything is going along la-di-da when we're gelling together, or the person really needs a kick in their pants. Not by being harsh, not by being mean, but just by being compassionate and not sugarcoating things. That is enough to make a person feel that way. But that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about the wounded healer. But let's first establish there's nothing wrong with being wounded. There's nothing wrong in having trauma. There's nothing wrong in baggage. That's part and parcel of this. But a wounding healer is very different. Now, I've actually written this down because for the most important articles and videos, I do tend to write it down so that people can also read it. Because not everybody works well with the video format, and that is fine. Sometimes, because I am extraordinarily sensitive, I might watch a video with the sound off and just read the captions. And because those are my energetic needs. There's no disrespect by that. So for very important videos like this one, there will also be an article provided. So a wounding healer is someone who is not about feeling uncomfortable because someone has. I knew this was going to happen. I knew it. There's lightning in the sky. As I was preparing to do this video, there was like this lightning and thunder and everything outside, and I was like, oh dear. But okay, so getting to it. A wounding healer, not a wounded healer, is someone who, it's not about feeling uncomfortable with facilitation. It's not about feeling like, oh God, I have just had my ego handed to me and I need to go and sit and cry for a week. It's not about that. It's not about truth tellers who are speaking truth even if it's uncomfortable. It's about people whose truth causes harm because the healer does not want to get uncomfortable. It's about people who have settled into a certain specific understanding of truth that puts them on a pedestal, that doesn't hold them accountable, that doesn't help them or the other person, and they stick to that truth. And because the person receiving healing may be in a dire state or they don't know any better, they go there and then they get hurt. Now, it can happen at different levels. It can be getting an idea of yourself that wasn't really true in the first place. Lord knows I've had to work through projection. It can be literally getting psychically attacked by whatever baggage the facilitator is holding and has not cleaned for themselves. It can be actually having really important information withheld from you because that person refuses to see what it is because it makes them feel small or makes them feel inadequate. That is a wounding healer. And it becomes more and more significant when you actually go to someone to do very, very in-depth spiritual work. And there is a reason I'm talking about this now. In the skies, we have Mars, Mercury, and Therius, the hunter-stalker, all very close to each other, all in a very tight alignment to Vesta, the priestess, Nessus, the abuser, and the great attractor in Sagittarius, all of which deals with truth. So this is a time where if you choose the wrong person, you are going to find yourself on a path that you didn't need to be on that will bring you a lot more pain rather than good. But this is a nuanced subject. So again, when the article is out, you're probably also going to want to read through that to make sure that all aspects of it that need to be covered have been covered. Here are some attributes of wounding healers. They do not understand the energetic consequences of their own work. They have not looked at their own energetic boundaries and hidden complexities. They are under contracts with unaligned energies and may not even be aware of it. Sometimes it's a case of unalignment, and sometimes it's a case of just fundamental incompatibility. A healer who is unaware of what they are actually doing can bring that to a client. Healer, facilitator, teacher, guru, leader, anybody. Other attributes of wounding healers: they lack the required skills, perspective, or experience for the actual task. Now, I'm never going to blame anyone for not knowing everything all at once because that's impossible. But at a certain point, you're going to have to ask yourself, do I have the skills that I need XYZ situation. And it is perfectly okay to say no. I do that a lot of the time. When I feel like, you know what, this is kind of over my head, I don't have the tools for this, I will refer someone to someone whom I feel has the tools. That is a healthy practice. A wounding healer will not acknowledge that limitation. They will assume that they can fix everything. They are the end all be all. Whatever is due is done with their best intention, so it'll all turn out all right. It doesn't work that way. As I was telling my T23 group, your intentions do not count for anything if the seed that you set is being set in poisoned soil. And that is the same standard that needs to be held when someone is giving, offering, or receiving any kind of spiritual service. One of the reasons why spirituality has become so commercial is because there is no oversight. There is no way to have that in a human form that is not going to get corrupted again, which is what has happened to a lot of mainstream religions. So people can claim anything. They can say, I'm now a channel for this, and someone is going to go, oh, wow, you're an angel? I'm going to follow you. And then they get spiritually beat up. Yeah, that has happened so many times because people are not even aware that they need to ask these questions. Other attributes of wounding healers. They have taken psychic and spiritual shortcuts. That happens when you rely on third parties to accelerate your growth and facilitation. That also happens when you use substances, even if they are sacred indigenous plants, which I have respect for. But if you use them in a way to take a shortcut, you will open a lot of back doors for yourself, but also for anyone that you facilitate. Wounding healers are also in an extreme state of emotional, psychic, or spiritual disassociation, often accompanied by paralysis and fear. Now, if a person actually knows this about themselves and continues to do deep spiritual work for others, they are pathological. Just know it is wrong. But most of the time, people who do this are not even aware that there is an attribute of themselves that they have not even acknowledged or begun to acknowledge. And there are many reasons why this could be. Past life bullshit is usually the main theme there, as are hidden contracts, as are ancestral issues. But that is the thing. To actually become a facilitator who is not going to wound your clients, you need to do all of this work. Which is why when people ask me, is this the right path for me? I tell them, well, this is all of the stuff you have to do if you want to do this for real and in a good way. Are you actually willing to put in this much effort? Most of the time the answer is no. And that tells you something, because you have to hold yourself to such accountability to do this in a way that isn't going to backlash to you or to others. Because whatever you do, especially when you are doing something for another in the name of healing, in the name of spirit, in the name of anything you consider sacred, and you have not done your work, that karma comes back to you manifold. And that is not a good thing for anyone. So it's good to actually ask yourself these questions if you're interested in giving or receiving facilitation. Other attributes of wounded healers, and this is one that I realized recently when I thought about a healer who I trusted a lot, because at that time I didn't actually believe in what I could do for myself, just because I'd been gaslit for so long, And I found so many backdoors, and I found so much of issues. But it didn't occur to me that the first time I had met this person there was already a major red flag, which at that time I didn't know how to notice. And you know what? I talk about this stuff. Almost nobody else does. And that's not an ego thing. My brother tells me, look, when you were on Facebook, people copied you lots because you spoke about so many things. And then people started writing about them. And you know what? Whether they did, whether they didn't, that's up to them. But it's true. When it comes to actually standards in spiritual facilitation, I am one of the very few people, in fact, the only person I know of who goes into it to this level and this degree. And of course, if there are other people also doing it, good job, keep doing it. One of the things that I realized, one of the red flags was when I had met this healer, they were actually attending a workshop of mine. And I was doing my work, and it was actually quite a heavy thing because the land had so much going on with it. And instead of just being a participant, they took it on themselves to also co-facilitate. And of course, I didn't know about this till later because they were doing this silently. But then when I think about it and everything clicked into place, I went, oh God, I should have seen this coming. A wounding healer has a compulsive, almost pathological need to help, even when it is not required, not requested, or even appropriate. Which is one of the reasons why when I do my Tier 23 meditations, I make people agree to the rules. Even if you think you know your shit, leave it at the door. You either respect my space or you don't have to come. And it's that simple. But a wounding healer will not respect that because they will assume that they know more. Now, another thing that wounding healers tend to do is to justify harm in the name of the greater good. Now, one time I asked someone, and I mean, I've met some good people, but I've also met people who've looked at and gone, oh dear God, why? Why did this happen? Why did you give me such bad advice? And I've heard oh no, but it needed to happen this way. You had to be wounded because of karma, because of spirit, because of this, because of that reason. And of course, that's BS. There's no greater justification for giving a person bad advice. It just means it's bad advice. And when I encounter people like this, I don't actually do anything. You might think that I basically call them and tell them that I think, well, you can imagine what I might say. But what I actually do is I just disengage. Someone like that is not going to listen to you. And even if they internalize the fact that something they might be doing is wrong, they're going to blame you for having insecurities. It does not work. You just cut the cord and you keep moving along. It's hard, and there's always a legitimate anger that comes up when you realize this has happened to you, but sometimes that is the best thing to do because it's not your responsibility to fix them either. Let me continue with the list. Other attributes of wounding healers are they lack adequate spiritual clearance for the role. If you are working with, even if it's spirit with a capital S, you need to make sure that you have the permission to work. Because even if you can do something, even if you have a certain skill, if you are doing it in opposition to the larger energies of spirit, again, that is going to bite you in the butt. Most people don't even think about this. Just because they can do something or they feel they've got a qualification to do something, they mess about with another person's path. And that's also not right. And that also causes a lot of unintentional harm. And last but not least, they refuse to be held accountable. Now, this is just like it's a foundling list. I haven't seen this written anywhere else. But this is it's a basic list just based on what I've experienced. And you might ask, well, why do you know this? And I go, because I'm paranoid. After going through what I went through to try and find a decent teacher, I have always been overcautious with my clients. I've always learned from the experiences that I had and just went, oh, this is not the way to do this. I even remember the first person that I encountered as a spiritual teacher decided that they needed my help to secure some property. And yeah, I even vouched for them and everything, was very, very close to them. But the moment they got it, they decided to go and oust me because they were so threatened by the fact that people would start to hear what I had to say. And that was a so-called spiritual teacher. It's one of the reasons why I'm very, very cautious with work. Boundaries must always be intact. So even when I felt that, that gut-wrenching pain when I actually found the person I see as my teacher, to be fair, it wasn't even something that had to do with other people. It was more to do with certain beliefs that I had about the universe. But then again, I've always just been very, very cautious for this reason. So, and it's about time to talk about this because people need to hear. Now, most of the time, the person that tends to need to look at this list, and again, check out the article when it's out, is the person who justifies their work in the name of, I've done a lot of shadow work. That tends to be the person who needs this list the most. If you try to justify an error in work, or a lack of perception, or a lack of awareness by the thing of, oh, but I've already done so much, you know nothing. That's what it is. You know absolutely nothing. And is having hit that space before, I can say it with empathy, not with judgment. And it is okay to be in that space. But that's another big telltale sign. But in cases like this, when you have actually encountered a wounding healer, you can be so messed up for a long time that you have to first determine, was it you? Do you even have the problem someone said you have, or is it projection by the facilitator? I've had this happen to me because my energy is very scary to most facilitators. Simply because if they fuck up, I will tell them, and they don't like it. So a lot of people will actually say, uh, if they have any sense, they'll think about it, and then they'll really, really be cautious. And so the people who I work with are those who are willing to face the challenge. Because when you work with someone who works at a very, very, when I say high, I'm not talking about a pedestal, but a subtle level of energy, you need to be able to do the same thing. So when I actually work with people, it is because I trust their ability to reflect. And as a facilitator, I do the same thing. Every step of the work needs reflection. It's not just, I give you a reading, bye-bye. It's preparation, work, post-work, making sure everything is okay. It is a process. But I know over time I've learned to trust my gut because I came from that place of being heavily projected upon, and then realizing, actually, no, I have something to say and I can actually do things. I remember one person who did not like the fact that, I seemed so confident. And they said, oh, well, you've never had problems. No. There are times in my life where I wasn't even sure of the ground that I stood on. So whatever I seem to have has been earned. It was not granted like a magic wand. It has been earned. And I hear Lucky in the background agreeing. It was earned. But having said that, over time, I've learned to trust my intuition and perception on things, but it was a process, and it was a brutal one, in fact. And of course, there are some instances in reverse where someone has good information and they are perceived as a threat by the other person's ego. And rather than acknowledge that, the person avoids an actual source of good counsel. If you find a teacher or healer like that who scares you shitless and you realize it's just your fear because you don't want to know what they have to say, listen to what they have to say despite the discomfort. That is not the same thing as going to someone with 10,000 back doors. But and my brother asked me as I was, reading this out, he said, what if you're someone who doesn't have a good sense of intuition or awareness? What if you don't know what a gut instinct is? How do you define that? Because sometimes, and this is a very sneaky version of it, a wounding teacher does not always feel bad. Sometimes they feel great, and those are the hardest ones to actually see through. Sometimes you encounter someone who just makes you feel so good because they are so holy and everything is so wonderful. And eventually what happens is you end up addicted to that person's energy. It's also one of the reasons why I do not take clients repetitively, because I do not want that kind of addiction to happen. And it happens if you have a very, very strong connection to spirit. Sometimes a wounding healer will actually try to hook you in because they are able to give you temporary relief, and you become more dependent. Rather than trusting your own judgment, rather than trusting your own connection with spirit, it becomes about the other person and what they can do and what they offer. And eventually, you are outsourcing your spiritual experience to that person who then acts as a gatekeeper that you didn't even need in the first place. And that can even happen when you feel good after a session. So how can you tell the difference? And it's a tricky subject. But how can you tell the difference? So that is what my brother was asking me. And then I came up with a couple of things. I said, if you're not sure if this applies to you, look at the results. If you keep going back to someone and you feel good, but then over time you keep getting worse, or the problem hasn't been resolved, that's a possibility. There are other reasons why there could be, but that's a possibility. Another possibility is, again, addiction. You might look at someone as a kind of battery or starter for your energy, and you're not actually developing in yourself because you've outsourced everything. If you feel that facilitator needs to make more and more decisions for you, and you kind of rely on their judgment rather than yours in your everyday living, those are all signs this can happen. Then you may have had that experience. Now, acid test is if you do a cord cutting with the specific intention of closing any back doors to anything that could have come through a healing or facilitation session with someone. even if it's something that made you feel good at the time, and you actually feel a lot lighter and a lot heavier, or rather, and a lot freer, no longer heavy after that. If you feel lighter, if you feel freer after you do a cord cutting session with the intention of removing back doors with a healer or facilitator, you have identified a problem. And that is a very strong indication of you have encountered a wounding healer. Now, there is also another possibility that you may have been sticking your nose into something that you didn't need and also taken on their stuff which you didn't need to. That is also that possibility which needs to be stated. But one or more of these telltale signs can help you because it's easy to project. If you don't like what someone says, you're a wounding healer. If you feel uncomfortable, you hurt me. It's so easy to project on people that way. So when you have a list of things that you can look at and think about, then you have more of something to speak from. Have I received complaints like that? Of course I have. And 99% of the time, it tends to be something that the other person has taken in a bad way. And in fact, in one case, it was literally a person gave me the wrong date of birth and started saying, but I didn't feel heard, I didn't feel seen. And I'm like, this isn't even your birthday. Why did you give me this? And then, in cases like that. But it's always a case of communication and clear, compassionate understanding. Even in anyone, there is no one that is always going to get 100% positive reviews. There's always going to be that 1% of people who are going to project on you because they want someone to play their drama out on. But in most cases, in my case, I have almost always, it has been a case of, oh, okay, I see what you mean now, I got it. And everything has been cleared up in a span of a short email. Because it happens. When you do deep work and your ego gets cut or pricked, you're going to react. And a facilitator needs to hold space for that. But in cases where you are dealing with a wounding healer, you may not get that resolution or closure. And that is something you need to be very clear about. In fact, sometimes it can be someone who seems like they're on a pedestal, seems like. Sometimes it can be someone who seems very, very earnest, very vulnerable, very in tune with their own, fears and traumas and phobias. And you have to ask yourself, if that person does not actually seem able to hold their space and hold their own energy, are they a safe person for you to work with? So wounding healers come in many different ways, in many different spaces. Is this to say that someone can never make a mistake during a facilitation? No, that's not true. Even with the people I work with, I go, if I feel like something's not been done right, or if I feel like they've overlooked something, I'll be, hey, let's talk. How did this happen? Can you explain this? And then we are back. So as I was saying, even if it's someone I work with and I go, hey, did we miss this? Did something happen here? And they may look at that and go, oh yeah. And it becomes a learning experience. It becomes something that doesn't harm anybody. And people become better for it. So it's not to shame anyone who's learning. It's not to shame anyone who, may have missed something because they are too afraid to look at it. A wounding healer is someone who's done this compulsively to the point where they cannot even afford to consider they've made a mistake. And their ego is so fragile to the point where if you do raise the problem, you are seen as the problem rather than them. And there we have thunder and lightning. So, I know that this can make a lot of people very uncomfortable, but it's important. It's important to assess. It's important to think. Have I, in my own work as a facilitator, have I been guilty of some of this? When I started early out, yes, before I met my teacher. And what I did not understand was how powerful I was when I actually started looking at people. And as I say, thankfully, with grace, nothing bad actually happened as far as I'm aware. But then when I realized what happened to people, and even in a good way, when I started reading for them, it made me rethink my work and to take it seriously as it should be taken, as a sacred expression. And at that point, I didn't know, because nobody tells you that someone who reads your chart is actually opening energetic gateways into you. Nobody tells you that. And that is why I don't give my date of birth out. Effectively, when anyone has any deep connection to you, whether it's your psyche, whether it's your body, whether it's your spirit, whether it is your astral self, whatever it is so intimate, and it needs to be taken with the deepest sincerity and the deepest sanctity. If you find someone who is not treating your spirit with that level of respect, then you may want to consider if they are worth working with. When I have seen facilitators treat clients like crap, I've just been like, I've not been impressed. But that means I also would never recommend a person to them again. And again, that's not the same thing as being strict. That's not the same thing as being truthful. That's not the same thing as having boundaries. But where someone does not respect the spirit that you are, that's a clear sign that this is not a fit. So that is what I wanted to share with you. I know a lot of you didn't ask for this message, but I know it will land to those of you who really need to be thinking about it, whether you give, whether you receive services. And again, there is no end to this learning curve, so everyone is learning. But if you feel that you're super rigid about what you think you know and what you think you are, a master of, you may want to reflect very, very deeply. So having said that, and I hope that my words were intelligible despite the two gaps in the internet, but hopefully my words have been intelligible. And if there are any questions vis-a-vis this, I'm holding open the space for this. Just let me know, type the comments, and let's see where we get on with this. And maybe the group can also come up with some interesting perspectives on this, because everyone's been through it. In this day and age, everyone has been through this. I'm certainly not an exception, but I draw my inspiration from what I have experienced. So it's that simple. Oh, hi, Jesse. Hi, how are you? Hello, Archangel. Nice to see you. And from earlier, hello, VB. Hello, Adar. Hello, Magneto. Hello, Melanie. Hello, Somfeld. Hello, Kelsey. Nice to see all of you. If you have any questions on the material that has been covered, please let me know. It's a big one. I know it's a big one. But it's important at this time. It doesn't matter. Even if it's something you think is a very small or low-level thing, it can, if a back door is open, it can bring a lot of unintended consequences. So that is important for this very, very volatile time. But yeah, any questions? Melissa says, much love to you, Dr. B. I'm glad you're feeling better. Thank you very much. Not to gross anyone out, I did manage to get up and go to the loo today, which is fantastic. So hopefully surgery is going to be totally avoided. And I'm very happy to hear that. Though I also saw people leaving my Instagram just because I said I was getting better. So probably good. Probably a good thing they left. But I'm glad that the YouTube community tends to be very, very supportive. So does anyone have questions vis-a-vis the wounded and the wounding healer? Of course, everybody's wounded. This is a given. But the question is, do you actually heal or do you harm? So any questions vis-a-vis this? We seem to be, everyone seems to be quiet, which is okay. Cool. So in that case, I can bring this to a close, and I will be, hang on. Hi, Quintessence. I would highly recommend you to go back to the start, because there's a lot of information that has been said, and I will not do you or me justice by trying to recap that in a minute. So please go back to the start, and if you can also write your questions in the comments if we finish earlier. Vivi says, I met a person who is wounded but at the same time toxic. That tends to be, like I said, everybody is wounded, Vivi. There's no one who's not wounded. And the most dangerous types are the fellows who don't even know they're wounded in the first place. The thing is, it's whether or not, as you put it, it's whether or not it is toxic, which is another way of calling the wounding healer. Wisdomfeld sends emojis. Yay, emojis. Vivi says, I thought of helping initially, but now after finding out the reality, it is pathetic. knowing you and remembering your chart, yes, I would say for you doing that is a great breakthrough. Well done, well done, well done. It is a very, very good step for you. Proud of you. Good job. Quintessence says thank you. You're most welcome. Um, but yes, anybody else? Do we have any questions? Do we have anything that needs to be covered? Uh, Dijin says it would be so good to have a deeper dive to this. Maybe set up a meeting with paying participants. Maybe. To be honest, everyone is going to have a different experience. But I would just say pick a session and we'll see what is specifically affecting a person if such a thing has happened. But maybe you can write to me. My email is theskypriestess@gmail.com. Maybe you can write to me with some ideas and we can see what's possible. Vivi says, I'm trying to mail you from a new email. How do I do it? Theskypriestess@gmail.com. Same email. Nyam Puja says, not any questions, but food for thought. Glad to hear you getting better. Thank you so much. It has been such a long time. It has been such a long time. You learn a lot about yourself when you have to use a bedpan. You learn a lot about yourself. Which is why I was so happy I was able to get up and go to the loo today. I was so happy. But yes, you got to be humble about life. You got to be humble about life. You have to laugh at life, and then sometimes you got to cry. And I can tell you there's been a lot of all of the above. But yeah, slowly, step by step. Cannonball says, also glad to hear you getting better, Dr. Bhairavi. Thanks for doing these. You're most welcome, and thank you for the shout out that you gave me in your video. I forgot to write to you, but thank you. Quintessence says, do you feel forgiveness is necessary? This is a good question. Can one simply take the lessons and move on without admittance of forgiveness? Well, it depends what you mean. It is related to the topic, and I'm glad you brought it up. So when I found out that I had been harmed by a healer rather than helped, it took a while because sometimes you don't see the effects immediately. My first response was anger. Because I trusted this person. I trusted them. I trusted, their abilities. I trusted, in some sense, my family's safety. And that is a very serious thing for me to do. And I was angry about it. And I did give them the opportunity to, experience the feedback and say, hey, can I speak to you about certain things that I have seen? And they said no. So I said, okay, fine. Was I angry? Absolutely. But, and this is where there's a big but, one must not judge. And it's very hard to do. I know it's very, very hard to do. Because one simply does not know the shoes that the other person is in. You can know, is this person safe for me? Are they not safe for me? And if they're not safe for you, you have no business interacting with them. It's that simple. There is benevolent beings to help everyone who truly wants to grow. And if someone claims to be a facilitator, they know that, or they should know that. You don't need to be the patsy for that. But in terms of forgiving someone who has done this to you, or even your loved ones, and it's harder sometimes when it's your loved ones, you have to realize that there is a greater, if you want to call it authority, you can. If you want to call it a presence, you can. You have to realize that there is a greater presence beyond all of us. And I'm not going to say there's a reason for everything, because a lot of it also comes down to our free will and choice. It is about seeking accountability in the ways that you need to seek accountability, and then letting the process take care of itself. Forgiveness is not about making sure that a person avoids accountability. You still need to hold them to account. You still need justice, but you just don't have to carry hatred in your heart. In that sense, that is where forgiveness is extremely important. You go, you know what? You're on your path. You're on your journey. You're going to be held accountable for your crap. I am moving along. And to me, at the very least, that is the baseline. Do you have to be nice to that person? No. Just do not mean them harm. Do not bear hatred. Because you don't know what might have happened. And to be honest, this could happen to anybody. So better not judge, because the moment you You try to, point that finger of judgment at someone, you're just going to find it pointing back at you. Maybe not this lifetime, but definitely another. So hold people to account. Do your part in making sure that your grievances have been addressed and keep moving along. That is what you need to do. Now, because religion has talked about forgiveness, and religion is also about social control in many ways. You do not need to forgive in a way that makes the person who harmed you feel nice. That's not your job. You just don't need to hate them. That's enough. And keep moving along. I hope that answered your question and in context of the larger discussion. What else? Do we have any other questions? And Vivi, I still have not received your email. Maybe it's in spam. No, it's not in spam. Okay, do we have any further questions with respect to what has been discussed? Okay, thank you. Yes, hate reigns itself. So is judging the same as not having expectations and standards for people and accepting what has been done? This is a good question. You must have standards. You must have expectations. You absolutely must. When I say don't judge a person, I mean don't morally condemn them, because you do not know who they are. You do not know what they are. You do not know their situation. And you are nobody to judge. But you can hold them to account. For example, let's say you, how do I put this in a way that makes sense? Let's say you buy something from a company and they have advertised, this happened, actually I give you a very, very, okay, I see some very interesting comments going on, but okay, whatever. All right, so let's say you buy something from a shop, and I'll give you a very basic example. I was buying something from a pet shop for the babies, and they advertised a wooden stick with a teaser for the cats, and I paid the appropriate amount. And what I got instead was a plastic thing, which had nothing to do with what I paid for and would have been infinitely cheaper than the price. So what I did was I basically said, okay, I sent it back. I said, hey, this is what you advertised. This is what you sent me. Give me a refund. Accountability, redress, and that's it. Would it actually have served me to go, this company is morally unethical? These people are trying to exploit others. Would it actually have served me? No, it would have been a complete waste of my energy. That is what I mean by don't judge. But you must always have standards. So when you go into a facilitation, or even if you are a facilitator, you must absolutely set the boundaries. And in my case, you have to read a very long list of terms and conditions before I will even allow you near me. But that's how I do things. So if you are giving or offering services, set the boundaries. Explain your expectations, explain what you can do and what you cannot do. And be very transparent about that, or to the extent that is possible. But moral judgment, there is no place for that. And that is hard to do, because these things can have a very profound personal effect on your lives and also the lives of your family. It's very, very hard to find that position. But that is when you know you have actually gone a little bit on your journey. I hope that answers your question. Okay, Watchman says, evening. Hello, brother. Nice to see you. Suggest you go back to the basics. I think you like this one because I know you've also had experiences with people like this. Vivi says, I'll send it today evening. Sounds good. Quintessence says, thank you, Dr. Sky Priestess, for your time and answering my questions. You are most welcome. You are absolutely welcome. Great questions. Thank you. Thank you. Mahesh says, hi, baby. Love you like done. Hi. That's all I say. Hi. I don't even know how to respond to that anymore. So do we have any further questions with respect to someone I have worked with and I have stopped talking to you? Now you know why. It's that simple. But yeah, it's not my place to judge. Hold people to account, move along. Life is too short to be filled with regret or hatred because all that does is poison yourself. That does not help you, and it certainly doesn't help healing. You know, interesting forays into homeopathy just because at this point you should know that I am very curious about everything that has to do with healing. And I found something because I went years ago to a homeopath. This was when my awakening was starting. And I was in a different country, I was by myself, everything was breaking down. And I didn't know what to do. So I went to a couple of facilitators. One was a chiropractitioner. Even my chiropractitioner knows I have standards and I won't allow any old person to touch me. They know that. And another was this homeopath. And it was the first time I had that experience. And it wasn't a bad thing. I learned a lot. And I realized at some point that this person could no longer read me. She didn't understand what was happening to me. And so, what she ended up telling me was a lot more about herself and fears that she had for herself. And at that time, I didn't know about the concept of projection. But I knew that she just did not get the right read. And I was thinking about that recently, and she didn't cause any harm. As I said, everyone is here to learn. She didn't cause any harm by it, at least not long-term harm. And I was looking at the remedy and I was looking at its symptoms and I was thinking and thinking and thinking and I realized it had nothing to do with me. It was more about her. And, it was actually something that helped me feel happy because it was an impression that did last. It did last for what? I don't know. How many years has it been? 13 years? And it was something that I had always been, for some reason, it was just something about the way she expressed things to me that just never sat right. And, as I was learning more about it, I realized, oh, okay, that wasn't me at all. Phew. But sometimes, yeah. And as you can tell, I am obviously a very sensitive person. Sometimes I might be thinking about things literally for years, and then I might bring it up with someone, and they'd be like, "This is something that happened like years ago," and not like in a bad way, but just like I've been still thinking about it. What does this mean? But that's just how my brain works, you know. And a lot of the times, people just can't handle what is outside of their scope of experience. I've met so many well meaning people who ended up giving me a terrible time because the moment I looked at them and they looked at me, instead of helping me, I started triggering all of their shadow stuff because some people naturally trigger others. Some people do need to come with a trigger warning, but not in a bad way. One that says, come near me and your shit will come out. And that is something I also realized for myself. So, it's been a journey. It's been a journey, and I've had to work through a lot of projections and to know what is my shit and what isn't. And that has been a deeply revealing experience, and it's been deeply humbling. This entire journey is humbling. This entire journey is all about returning to love. And you can't return to love where there is no justice. And where there is a wound that someone has created and it is unaddressed, how can you talk about healing and love? So, it's related. So yeah, I hope this helps. I hope this helps. It's nice to see all of you. And I hope this gives you perspective to treat yourself and your spirit with more respect and to treat the other person with respect as well. A lot of people think I'm arrogant. I know that. Well, not the majority, but some people do. But it's because I take the time to look. I take the time to look. I take the time to feel, is this right? Is this not right? Where does this come from? Where does this go? And if I feel, you know what, this is not for me, I'll just be like, this is not for me, thanks. Or I might just be like, I'm walking this way, thank you. And a lot of people interpret that as a rejection. So naturally, the other projection comes along that isn't even mine. So as I continue to evolve, I see that at the end of the day, Spirit is always there for us to access. Sometimes we need help. Everyone needs help at a certain point. There are no exceptions. But it's become so important to treat that moment and to treat yourself with respect without needing to big you up or anything like that. So, and it applies to everyone. And if everyone can remember this in the way they give and receive help, we will have a safer spiritual community. And now you know. Now you can't unknow. So go do good things with this information. So I send all of you love. I see Quintessence feels validated. That's good. I'm glad to hear it. I send all of you love. I send all of you very many blessings. And I hope you continue to navigate your path in a way that truly aligns with your spirit. And to actually find people who can be honest enough with you to tell you, honey, I don't think I can handle this case. Or, hey, actually, I think I can. So that's about it. Ciao, ciao for now. Bye.